This is the Slots and Sockets podcast, episode number 63. I am one of your hosts, IRE Moose, and my partner in crime,
Turbo Penguin.
Happy Monday, Turbo Penguin. And hello to all of you out there in internet land. It is a beautiful Monday, and we are back at it after our episode was unexpectedly interrupted by an emergent situation. So
no problem. Everything worked out good too.
Good deal. Glad to hear that. So we have a few interesting stories that we talked about before the show. What do we want to get started with, Turbo?
Well, I think we probably should talk about good, happy things.
I like happy things. There's been a lot of bad news in our episodes lately. So
I know. So let's go on to something good. The 9060 XT gets greenlit, and a bunch of board partners have a bunch of pre-done cards. Obviously just images, and it's super positive. Reviewers have these. They already have drivers. They're already playing with them. They're actually getting feedback. The general consensus that we're kind of hearing from the street is that this is a positive card. It is interesting. A couple of these cards coming out, like the Nitro Sapphire RX 9060 XT, uses the same design as the 9070, but the biggest difference is you don't get the hidden connector like you did on the 9070, and they've moved it over to an 8-pin, but everybody in every card here is using a single 8-pin. I don't see a single one of these that has two connectors, let alone anything more than just a double. So it looks like they're, I mean, it is the mid-range, and from my understanding, it's $349 for the 16 gig, and that's, from what I'm hearing, it is going to be the only one available at launch. It's going to be the $349, but at $349, the loaded question is can they really put a dent in 5060 and 5060 Ti? That's the loaded question. Is at $349. Now that's the MSRP. So what the end piece cost is, that's the loaded question.
Yeah.
It seems like everything is above MSRP these days. A good deal is like $150 or $130 over what it should be costing.
So I think the real question is, how long will it stay at MSRP? Because it's probably going to launch if it follows the pattern that 9070 and 9070 XT followed.
Well, and I believe that, so if you are in this price point, you will want to get to a Micro Center or be very quick on your feet, because I do believe the launch date, which is in June, I want to think it's like June 7th. It's not far off, but you'll want to move really quickly on this if this is the card you want to upgrade to. Now, the real question, and I would say that this is probably going to be the real question here, is that, for people who are on a 1080 Ti or like a 2070 or 2080 Ti, the question will be, how does this line up with some of those legacy high-end cards? From a speed perspective, you're going to pick up some ray tracing and some efficiency, obviously, compared to a card that's 5, 6, 7 years old. Where does this kind of fit in? And that's where, it seems like on this one specifically, AMD has been very upfront and very clear about the performance. I think they're doing that purely because Nvidia just like crapping themselves, how bad they can figure out, how can we make this launch worse? Let's release a card and not let anyone review it.
Are we sure Nvidia hasn't hired AMD's CPU marketing team?
I don't know. I mean, at this point, I don't know what it is, but I mean, this will be a really interesting card if the cards that you've had been a little pricey for you, and if this is in your price point, all pieces point to this being a strong card in its price point. I do believe this is going to give the 5060 Ti a run for its money. And given that you're going to be able to do 16 gigabytes on this card, that's going to be the highly recommended card. I almost wonder if we're going to see the 8 gig in more like Alienware and HP Omen desktops, like more
Probably.
OEM stuff.
Yeah.
I still look at that and question why you would have it for $50. Like, why? I don't see the use case of people like, I only want 8. When for $50 more, you're going to really kind of give you some longevity of this card.
Well, I think that's exactly it. It's because it's $50 more, because they can anchor the price at the 8 gig model and then be like, but you can get double the VRAM and significantly more port performance for 50
okay,
bucks.
Okay, and
it's a shelf
playing
filler.
devil's advocate. Then why make the 8 gig card? This
because
seems like
because Nvidia has one,
I still look,
which is stupid reasoning. But yeah,
I would look to AMD and say, just because they do dumb things doesn't mean you should do dumb things.
I absolutely agree. I said
You
the
sit
same
there and
thing
say,
to my landlord.
AMD should easily just come out and say, we're sorry, we don't have an 8 gig card. We think 8 gig cards in 2025 is stupid.
Yes.
We know you're going to use more of that. And rather than sell something that's going to be obsolete and useless, we're just going to only sell a 16 gig card.
Yeah. And kind of on that note, that 8 gigs is functionally useless. One of the stories that you kind of tossed across my feed was about a 9070 that somebody upgraded from 4 gigs to 8 gigs.
That's a 9070 too, yeah.
And it's a 9070. Now, kind of circling back to the 9060 XT, and I think I said 9070, I meant 970. Circling back to the 9060 XT for a moment, how much of a black eye would it be if the 16 gig 9060 outperformed the 5070 8 gig? Just think about that for a minute. But a 970 with double the VRAM. Now, granted, they shipped with 3.5 gigs plus half a gig of memory. And so in this case that you sent me, the people that were messing with it had goofed around and doubled that VRAM by putting new chips on. And they had some interesting results.
Yeah, really interesting results. And it was obviously not conclusive. Like, you didn't see like a 60% in every game, but there were for sure games where you saw an uptick at up to 40%. So this for me had the question is, we've got these cards that in the past we've sit there and say, well, they don't have a lot of RAM. Now the loaded question is that, like, we've never really seen services that have curtailed, modifying and adding RAM to GPU.
Right.
Mainly because, if the drivers say it has 8 and the developer thinks it's going to have 8, just having 16 doesn't guarantee you're going to see an uptick if it doesn't know how to use an extra 8 gigs or, let's say it goes up to 12 or whatever that number is. So that probably is one where I would say, whatever the cost is, I don't see how that would be, super helpful or I guess reliably useful. But it begs the question, like, because I do believe in some of these you do have to have custom BIOSes to use this, and if you're using not
always. Yeah. A lot of the experiments I've seen in the past where they've doubled the VRAM on like 3080s and 3070s and other cards, you put it on there and it just detects it and runs. And a lot of times that's because they use a common BIOS framework for cards that do anywhere from, 8 gigs to 96 or more gigs. And so, that it's something that you would have to verify on a model by model basis, which, yeah, that's going to be potentially risky. But what I think this is good news for is the long-term use in the consumer market, because that provides a use case for going to AMD and being like, hey, we have this cam 2 stuff coming out with basically flat memory that could flat mount to the back of your PCB, or maybe in a little compartment, and that you put some heat thermal pads on. And why not do that? Why not give us that option, AMD? Like, look, I get that you want to sell cards, but we also don't want to throw cards away that are still good performing, if they or still could be good performing if they had a sufficient amount of VRAM. Because in a couple of these cases, Cyberpunk 2077 on this 970, which again, still a good card, but it increased the frame rate on Cyberpunk 2077 at high settings by 16% in these test results. Horizon Forbidden West really got a 40% boost.
I am 100.
And Last of Us Part 2, the remastered version, 24% boost. That's enough of a boost in current games to extend the life of a card by at least a couple of years. And
here's
just plain
devil's, but just plain devil's advocate here. By the time you're getting to a point where you're really, looking at it and saying, I'm trying to get my card longer, like how do I use it longer? I asked the question, is at that point, aren't you kind of due for an upgrade?
Yeah, but that's the thing. That's why you sell like a Cam 2 card that adds another 8 gigs of GDDR6 or whatever was on that card. I forget what it was. Maybe it was GDDR5 on that one. Oh, they have it was GDDR5. If Nvidia had the set of pads for Cam and you plopped another 4 gigs on there, even if it used the same bus, you double your VRAM, you double your capability to continue to use that card a little longer, stretch some life out of it. But they could also charge you an additional premium on that. So for cards where they ship it with 8 gigs and like the case of the 9060 XT, where they charge you an extra $50 for the one that's double the size, charge $100 for the memory stick. Easy. I mean, you got a captive at least something of a captive market there, and you're effectively extending the life of these GPUs by quite a bit. And some people might even buy the more expensive GPU and right off the bat, double the VRAM on the spot. So you might actually get 2 sales out of 1 card. If that were an option, I'd probably go there. I'd probably just max it out right from the start.
I think that the loaded question is, and I think Cam is an interesting idea. All I can say is that with Cam, we don't even see Cam in motherboards yet.
Yeah.
And
I think MSI has one.
I mean, Computex last year was like the next biggest thing, and it just has not really done anything. So, all I would say is that I'm still leery of Cam, because we sort of were told it was going to be all amazing, and it obviously hasn't.
It kind of fizzled.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know maybe what the issue is, but there's obviously something either stopping it from coming full circle to market, or
same thing happened with Light Peak. So, and eventually that came out as Thunderbolt. But we might see something like Cam come out in the future where we have a more compact connector like that, and it works better for smaller systems. And and that's why I didn't say specifically Cam. I was talking Cam like something along those lines, where it would be a flat pack sort of IKEA style sandwiching it together sort of deal. But yeah, I mean, I think this just kind of proves this story proves that if we were afforded the opportunity to upgrade our GPUs, and then we could get some better life out of them. It would be better for the environment. It'd be better use case for users who might need a GPU but can't really get something current and have to go to the used market. And, if you spent 120, 130 bucks on a 970, which I'm just pulling that number off the top of my head just randomly, and then, oh, hey, you can get this $100 add-on that makes it outperform a 2070 or 2060, then score, you know. Granted, the drivers are going to cease to exist pretty soon here, but it's I think it's something worth potentially looking into because there are people who would buy those upgrades.
I think there are people that buy the upgrades. I'm not saying that. I just think there's no way because of how hard Nvidia has worked to limit the VRAM of these cards that they would ever support
Yeah,
modification
sure.
to allow more, because that's, they've worked so hard. Now maybe it's a way for them to say, if they can find some money to do it, okay. But
and that's why I'm saying somebody like AMD could do that, because I don't think Nvidia would. They'd just be like, buy a new card, noob.
I think that's exactly what it is. I mean, with that being said, I think that's probably, I mean, it's probably AMD to the same extent. I don't think that's an Nvidia only one, but I would say that, yeah.
I mean,
anyways,
AMD has impetus to innovate because they're trying to capture market share from Nvidia. Nvidia is like Intel was on the CPU game 5 years ago. Well, not even 5 years ago, more like 8 years ago. So pre 2017, pre Ryzen. And they have really no impetus to innovate because they don't see themselves as having competition. And I think by the time AMD starts looking like competition, I expect Nvidia to completely pull out of the consumer market. But we don't know because that's just in the future and remains to be seen. So stay tuned. It's going to get fun. Moving on, we had a couple other stories. I know we're trying to stay on the good news, so I'm going to hold the 5060 BIOS fix for later. I mean, that's kind of good news.
Fix, it's screwed up.
Yeah, they screwed it up and they released the fix. So yay. If you
all
got
7 of you who own a 5060, get a BIOS.
Update your BIOS, guys. Like how often do we have to update BIOSes on graphics cards? Like I've had one in my lifetime, and that was to add 4K support to my 1070.
Yeah.
and that's because it didn't exist when the 1070 shipped, but the software support was able to be added for it. So I don't know. I mean, come on, guys. Let's get our crap together. But I think probably the most interesting story that we came across today was Nvidia leaked a prototype 5090 that had, count them, 4 12-volt high power connectors. And they had power stages for them. Now, I can't tell looking at the board how it was designed, kind of what the layout is. Somebody who's much better versed in reverse engineering and following traces and all that fun stuff could do that. I don't know if they could from the photo that we have because it's a little blurry. But I think this prototype board shows that Nvidia could have shipped a 5090 that doesn't melt connectors.
Oh, I think without a doubt they could have. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that Nvidia could have done this.
Sure.
The 3090 never melted connectors, and that goes to a design change from the 30 series to the 40 series. I don't think we've ever had a 30 series with a burnt cable. but we see it plenty of them on the 40 series and 50 series.
Yep.
So obviously, if you were to go backwards, and the 30 series was the first cards to use the 12 volt high power connector. Why is it that you have no failures to all of a sudden you have that being a major topic of concern with people who own a 4090 and a 4080
and a 5090 and 5080? Now,
so
50,
I would
5080s
say
and 4080s don't melt the connectors as often because they are limited. I think it's to 400 watts. But with the design, it is still possible. Less likely.
it's just a poor design.
Possible.
It's a poor design.
Yeah.
It's a poor electrical design. And what's interesting is that we even on the Radeon side for like the Nitro Plus, no issues.
Nobody's melted a Nitro Plus that I've seen.
No,
yeah.
we've got there's a couple other ones that use the 12 volt high power. They don't have problems.
Yeah.
So without those problems, that tells us to say that the assumption that these were poorly designed power delivery systems, and it's using the same problem. So them thinking, well, if we make the metal pieces a little bit longer and they have better connection, they won't. Nope, that's not it at all, you idiots.
Yep.
You guys really just screwed it up. And my guess is that when they realize where the problem is, they're going to either do one of two things. They're either going to lower the TDP in the 6000 series. They're going to have two power connectors, or they're going to have one power connector that goes right to the 600 watts. It uses all 600 watts, but that they actually fix it so that it actually pulls the right amount of power per cable. And if it senses a bad cable connection, it will have a pop-up report back. There's lots of ways to fix this, but again, it's them not doing dumb things. And this starts going back to Nvidia. You really kind of screwed the pooch on this one. And why is it that we're still talking about this? Because it's still an issue, because it's never been rectified. The 30 series was fine. 40 and 50 sucks.
Yep.
And it's just a bad design.
It is. And at this point, with it being such a bad design, power supply manufacturers are having to compensate for it. A good example is Der Bauer had a video from Seasonic's booth at Computex where they have engineered a protection system, both internally on the power supply and also a cable that you can get that allows you to monitor it.
There's plenty of actually products we've seen at Computex that do different things on the 12 volt connection to make sure that you're pulling even power between all of the cables. So you don't have one cable that's pulling 90% of your power through a single cable. And so it actually is actively looking at the load draw, and it's an adapter, something you put in the middle. But again, these are products that you sit there and say, you question whether you question whether you would put the money into designing something like this, because I'm surprised that they didn't resolve this in the 50 series power layout, but they obviously didn't. So, and if they haven't resolved it, then it makes me question is if they're not going to resolve it in future generations. It will be interesting to see, because the 4080 Super feels like it's almost all but confirmed for later this year. It was kind of it's the world's worst secret, because they even had board partners with boxes with the 24 gigabyte on the 5080. So
they're shipping it with the correct amount of VRAM for a 5080. Wow.
This is what I am saying. And my methodology on this is, if you're going to buy an Nvidia card, you better only be buying a Super Series card.
Yeah.
Because the first generation of these cards is not amazing.
Yep.
And the Super Series is what that generation should have been originally.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is on the 5080 Super that we're seeing, they've really shot themselves in the foot, and I'm kind of surprised because um they can't throw more cores at this thing.
Nope.
The only thing that they can do is give it more juice,
Mm-hmm.
which is going to translate to higher clocks and more heat.
Mm-hmm.
So then the other question is if we see a different power layout design, because it's going to be pushing well over 400 watts. If it's at the 450 to get the performance bump.
I bet it's going to use the 600-watt connector, and it's going to be the 5090 powered. It's probably going to be the 5090 board, and it's going to likely be electrically enabled for 600 watts, but controlled in the BIOS to do something like 450 or
No,
500.
They'll never let it hit that high. They're going to gimp it one way or the other.
Oh, they
They'll
always
use the
find a way to
same
give it.
connector. It's just the question is how much power are they going to allow you to use?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as
I
it
don't
stands,
know
the 5080 is limited by power, so they would have to go with the 600-watt cable.
Well, yeah, I think they'll. Well, that's a good question. I don't know. Time will tell on that one.
Yeah.
It's going to use more than 400 watts. So the question is how much? Like, are they going to go like a 20? But I mean, I think that if AMD releases a 9070 XTX or an ultimate 9000 series card,
Mm-hmm.
it may prompt them to maybe move that up. I don't think there's really much of a difference other than saying we gave it more memory and we gave it more power, and it has the same number of cores, but it's faster and it's going to have higher clocks. So
right.
I don't know. It will be, time will tell on that when we actually get a little bit closer. We're not really close.
No.
If you're sitting there and saying, "Oh my gosh, I want a 5080 Super," I mean, and it's nice that you might want it, but I don't know. I would sit around and wait because I don't know how soon. Yeah. I just don't know if the loaded question will be is if they don't feel like there's some pressure from AMD, it costs money to build it and throw it out there, unless they feel like they're going to get more money for it. But they're already getting $1,600 for a 5080. I mean, what do you think you're going to get a 5080 Super for?
I would probably say another $200.
I mean, at that price point, you're getting awfully close to what a 5090 should be.
Right. But not what they're selling for. And exactly, that's going to be the selling point.
I mean, but
I mean, you're going to, so their MSRP
sort of had
for
that
the
with
FE,
the 40 and the 4080 Super.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the 4080 Super, the honest truth is, the 4080 Super was a great card and still is a great card.
Yeah.
And if you bought that at MSRP at $1,000, that was a great buy, because the 4080 Super is, for the price,
like 95% of a 4090.
Competitive. Yeah. Still really competitive. So if a 5080 Super comes out, and if it's anything like the prior Super Series we've seen in the past, it will be an indication that might be the card to get.
Yeah.
Now, that's assuming that they don't screw it up. I wouldn't put it past them for sure on that.
No.
But
yeah, I mean, I expect Founders Editions will, since the 5080 is $1,000 for Founders, they're going to set the MSRP for somewhere around $1,250, and for the Super, and then say, well, hey, you got another 10-15% performance over the 40 or 5080, and so we're going to charge you another $250. So if you want it, great. And then once it actually hits the market, I expect we'll probably see those cards selling for $2,250 to $2,500.
So speaking of in stock, and this has kind of been a thing we've been talking about pretty consistently, is stock of what's in. One thing that I have seen, and we've talked a little bit about this, but I feel like the market has done a few things as far as graphics cards.
Mm-hmm.
First, I think the people who were trying to get a card, okay, have already purchased a card.
Yep. Yeah.
And at above the price of what at the MSRP. And now you've got all the people who went out and bought cards because they really, really wanted a card and spent a lot of money to buy a card. And now cards are so expensive that nobody's buying them.
Right.
So, for instance, at my local micro center, I have 20 5090s of the PNY overclocked, not the absolute OC, just the overclocked at $3,500.
Yep.
They have two at $3,400. And then they have three of the Zotac Amp Extreme. I believe that's the top of the line from Zotac at $3,300.
Yeah.
And then if you're super really wanting it for $29.99, you can get a PNY 4090 new in box. Three of them in stock. Now I will say the positive thing is that you can still at my local store get a Zotac, the base model 5090. It's still an overclocked model, but it's that's $29.99. I think what we're seeing is if I look just at my local micro center, I've got 35 plus cards, but none of them, they're all at least $1,000 over MSRP.
Yeah.
Now it gets even crazier when you get into the 5080s. The 5080s you can find lots and lots of in stock. Finding these cards is not the problem. Okay. It's the pricing of these 5080s. And what I don't get on these cards is like the cheapest is $1,490. So it's $1,489.99. It is absolutely crazy how expensive some of these cards are. 5070 Ti is listed in stock at $1,099. I think what's happening here is that the prices are so high that gamers are like, no.
Yeah.
They were like, no, that's not worth it. Or you had the enthusiasts that were like, heck yeah, give me a card, give me a card, give me a card, spent the money because they wanted the card. And now you've got those people done and sorted off. And now you've got people who are looking and say, wait, it's a $750 card. Why am I spending $999?
Right.
And so they just don't buy it.
Right.
Now, I will also say, and this I have absolutely seen, the used market has absolutely slowed down dramatically. Absolutely slowed down. Cards that were selling for way, way higher than they should have, whether they're a 50 series or a 40 series, or even like the 7000 series from AMD, those cards are absolutely just not moving. And it's only moving if you've got people who are absolutely like looking for a deal, and which means you've got to price your stuff accordingly.
Right.
I feel like at this point you're going to start seeing a bunch of stuff in stock. And I wonder if you're going to start seeing some of these prices come down a little bit. Because, like, for instance, let's see, what's the cheapest 5070 Ti? Micro Center has, I think this is, the cheapest 5070 Ti is $869. And at that cost, that's a gigabyte WindForce. That's the SFF overclocked model. At $869, considering that's an MSRP that should be at 749. I feel like that card is probably the card to get if you're looking for a 5070 in your that price point. That's not a horrible, over for it. But all of the cards, I mean, even the AMD cards are selling really expensive. And so it, I feel like that we're going to start seeing some maybe backpedaling on some of the pricing. Unfortunately, who that's going to hurt, it's going to hurt retailers.
Yeah, big time.
It
I
is going to
mean,
hurt retailers really bad on these.
if they start turning the price down, they're going to have to start giving out rebates to retailers because it's ridiculous. Like they bought those cards at horribly inflated prices. And so it's just, yeah, retailers are not going to be happy if the bottom drops out of the market, which I hope it does, because
I think
the 5080 should be $799. The 5080 Super should be $849 or $899. The 5090 should be $1,000. You should not be spending more on a graphics card now than most high-end gamers spent on a custom PC build with the top-end graphics card on the market and a full water cooling setup just a few years ago.
Yeah, it would be interesting to kind of see where this goes. But look, for anybody who's sitting on the fence right now, the only thing I can say is that I know you'll start seeing stuff closer to MSRP. I don't know if I would sit there and say you're going to see it here in the near future.
Yeah.
I
I think
don't
it's
know
going to
how
take months.
quickly. You're right, but I also think there's probably going to start seeing some stuff where getting a card is going to be. I mean, I can tell you this: if I'm looking at my local store, okay, for Micro Center, okay, and I'm looking at 9070s, okay, I have 10 models to choose from. The lowest being 799 and the highest being 940. So you've got choices when it comes to it. And I think it's important for gamers to realize what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even on the 50 series, which has been horrific, I have 5 models of the 5090. I have 10 5080 models. I have 12 5070 Ti models. So,
And how many 5060s are there?
5060s are, let's see, 5060, I have 6.
How many of them were there on launch day?
I don't know. I didn't go, and I just, but
that's the
I
thing
will
is, like,
say,
I've heard reports that 5060s were just not available on launch. So,
I don't know. I didn't go, didn't care to go on
yeah.
launch day. It wasn't worth my time. But I will say my local store has 5 Asus 5060 primes at $299. Now, with that being said, it also has 4 Asus TUF gaming overclocked models at 409.
Hmm.
So, um, not as, and there's cards in the middle. But actually the kind of interesting card here is this Gigabyte, because it's a short card. It's a low profile 5060. That is where I think that some of these cards, especially these entry, like a 50 90 60 XT, a 5060, if you could get a 5060 low profile, and if you put 12 gigs on that, I think that would actually sell really well. I feel like the 5060 isn't going to sell well because it's only got 8 gigs, and I think gamers are like, no. I just don't see that even at that price point.
Well, we're seeing that with the 5070.
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, the 5070, holy crap, there's a lot of 5070s. Let me see, there's 14 models of 5070s in stock.
Those are all 8 gigs?
Oh, the 5070s are all 12s.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, as I said, really interesting. I wonder if we're going to see maybe some innovation on the graphics to maybe show, or maybe kind of make gamers find some value in specific like models
Mm-hmm.
where you have small form or low profile cards. Um, so I don't know. It'll be interesting. This is an odd little spot where everything is. Um, but yeah, I mean, look, if you're looking for a 50 70, you should not be paying anywhere above MSRP
Yep.
at all.
Yep.
And I think it's absolutely insane. I've got some of these cards. Here's a 50 70, it's $789. And it's like, holy crap. And that's the MSI overclocked model. It's like, but even then, like this one here, save $90, if you're part of our club. They're giving member pricing because they're trying to get these cards moved because they realize that these cards are not going to move well.
Yep. Yeah. And well, retailers are just taking it in the shorts because nobody wants to buy the cards at the prices they're at this point. Well, I mean, not nobody, but not enough people to make it worth it. They're basically taking up shelf space. And the same thing's happening in Europe.
Someone's going to have to start eating this because I don't know if it's going to be the AIBs or if it's going to be like, manufacturer AMD and Nvidia saying, okay, these cards aren't moving.
Yeah.
And say, let's give us some rebate support. I don't know, but all I can tell you is if we keep going down the same path, there are plenty of cards in stock. So finding the availability is no longer the problem. The problem is these cards are way overpriced for what they should be.
Yep.
End of story. $789 for a 5070 is absolutely pathetic. Considering you're only going to get a 12 gig card.
And how does the 5070 compare to the 4080 in actual frames?
Oh, not good.
Yeah. But it beats a 4090 by 4x.
I mean, considering that I can get for like $850, I can get a PNY 5070 Ti. Actually, $749. Actually, is that correct?
It should be a $599 card.
Actually, I believe that's correct. It's a $749. So and they've got 13 of those in stock.
That's, I mean, compared to MSRP, you could make the argument that's a good price, but that card is still wildly overpriced. It's still wildly overpriced.
Sorry, it's $849. I lied. I'm doing my math wrong. It's hard.
Math is hard. That's
but okay. $849. but let's be honest here. So at $849, if you're in it and you're like on the fence, that card I think is close enough to MSRP that would say I would look at it and say, you know what, that's not a bad buy.
Yeah,
it is faster than a 4080 Super. Is it as fast as I think people would hope for? No. But is it a bad card? No, I just think that it's definitely not worth the crazy money that some of these cards are going for. And I think that everyone just needs to realize where they're going to find value in these cards and just, buy accordingly.
Yep.
If you're not happy with the pricing, don't buy a card. Yep. It's as simple as that.
Which that's what I plan on doing at this point because I already bought.
Or go the other side and buy a Radeon card. I mean,
yeah. Which I've been very happy with my XTX, and it looks pretty. It does the job, and you know what? I could see myself using this card for another 4 or 5 years, unless something really changes with UDNA. Or potentially UDNA 2. I don't see myself upgrading anytime soon. I got what I want. It's shiny and does the job. And on that bombshell, thank you all for listening. We appreciate you giving us a little bit of your time. And just want to remind you guys to like and subscribe and do all that fun stuff down in the doobly-doo below that pleases the algorithm and gets us in front of a couple more viewers each time. So thank you all for your comments. Thank you for your subscription. And until next time, have fun storming the castle.
Have a good week, guys.
Good night, everybody.